Ինքնություն եւ արժեքներ.
Dear members of the Identity and Values platform, dear guests, the topic of today's discussion is future of the culture in the era of technological revolution. Artificial intelligence as a game changer. The speakers of this discussion are Dmitry Aksyonov, real estate developer, culture and tech investor, philanthropist in arts and culture as well as in technology, founder and president of the Aksyonov Family Foundation and of the Immaterial Culture Association. Our next guest is from England. They have joined us online. Miss Carmody Gray. Carmody Gray is a philosopher, an ethicist, and a theologian. She is an assistant professor of Catholic theology at Durham University in the UK. She works mainly in the areas of philosophical theology and theological ethics, with a focus on science, nature, and the environment. And our last participant, who will also moderate today's discussion, is Mr. David Young. He is well known in the tech world with the companies that he has founded himself: ABBY, EVA, ICO, and a number of other companies. Recently, David has been very passionate with his new technological creation or project called Emotional Artificial Intelligence, and he also predicts that emotional artificial intelligence will play a decisive role in our lives in the near future. I would also like to mention that Dmitry, David, and I, as well as all the founders of the school, are also graduates of the Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology. Welcome, and I wish you a pleasant and meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Mesrop. We're so happy to be here in Armenia. And today I'd like to start this conversation with a question which I will ask to my friend Dmitry. I know Dmitry for many, many years. We, as Father Mesrop mentioned, we graded from the same college, from the same school in Moscow Physical MIPT. And Dmitry, however, you are a physicist by education, but I know that culture, and especially the evolution of culture brought by technology, is a big interest of you. And can you tell us, what is this when the culture merges with technology?
First of all, David, thank you for the invitation, hosting me in Armenia and this brilliant school in this nice setup. It's my first time in Armenia, and I'm already in the middle of energy circle and already experienced some friendly lunch and now we'll have intellectual challenge. So thank you for the question. The phenomena which we envision is, we call it Caltech, culture and technology. It's similar to what we have seen in different areas of economy and in society, like say financial sector was transformed by digital technology, and now we have fintech, which is not the appropriation of technology, but the reinvention of business models, of consumer behavior. Same with mobility, you name it. So our guess is, and our bet is that culture would have the same fate, so to say. So the way how culture is produced, distributed and consumed would be completely reinvented due to technology revolution which we face now. Which means the culture itself has to adopt and evolve, and technology also has to adopt and evolve, and together they will merge in a new phenomena which we call Caltech, and which is inevitably coming.
How do you understand culture?
As they say, it's a good question. So some people say that there are more than 500 ways of defining culture. So my definition is that culture is the best practices which humanity has absorbed from previous generations, how things are done. And basically that's how we see our past, how we live our present, and that's how we want our future look like. So that's sort of culture. But of course there's a more narrow definition when you're talking about arts. But knowledge, science, we also consider to be a culture, so producing knowledge and dealing with knowledge.
But previously we spoke about it with you, and you mentioned that there are some changes happening with consumption of culture. You mentioned that people in the future will have more free time, and the need in culture consumption will be different. So is this some kind of economy? What is experience economy, or?
Yeah, but if you allow me, I'll have a 3 minutes introduction why we think this is relevant to talk about this phenomena, which would be a big game changer for everybody in this room and outside of this room. So I think we are experiencing we experiencing a lot of changes, but the main reason for the change is connectivity to the information. So transparency, access to the information, due to mobility, and everybody has the personal device and have, as much knowledge as he can handle. It creates two big changes. So one is that there is no longer monopoly or oligopoly on the future, which used to belong to institutions, be it a state, be it a corporation, or be it a cultural institution or educational institution, you name it. Those were telling the stories of the future and making people to engage in their strategies. Now people have their own vision, enough of information to build up their own understanding of the future. But because of the excess of the information, it's another side of the medal, that there is a tsunami of the information, so you could have difficulty to choose which picture to believe. So as a result, everybody needs meaning. So there's a huge demand on meaning on all levels of society and hierarchies. And meaning and the picture of the future. So culture used to deal with meaning of life and meaningful questions like who we are, what's the purpose, to be or not to be. Those are the questions which culture being taken care of for thousands of years. That's why we think the culture would represent this option for demand, because there is a huge demand on meaning, and culture would be giving their picture, and more players would appear who would propose their picture of the future. It's necessarily not about culture, but that's our assumption, that culture would be answering the questions. But there could be other pictures, like, for example, let's fly to moon or to the Mars, that's our future, or let's start new green economy. So there are different options for a future perspective. But our answer is that culture would give more meaningful answers, because it would be more accessible due to technology, education would be more accessible due to technology, and people would have a better understanding about past, present, and thus being able to think about the future.
Can you bring your some example of Caltech? I know you have fund, you have startups which you support. Can you bring 2, 3 your favorite examples of startups you supported?
We just recently started we had 2 accelerators where we had twice 2 calls, and there were 100 applications, and we have chosen 8 startups. So all of them deal with different aspects: music, visual art, literature. One good example is Ativive. That's a company which is based in Austria, founded by Romanian mathematicians and marketologists. So it's an app which is a tool for artists, how they could implement augmented reality on top of traditional picture. So with your iPhone, your smartphone, you could see additional layer of the storytelling based on the specific visual object. We have another company which recently has raised 8 million for digitizing all the musical scores and giving extra flexibility and creativity, how you could use, instead of written and paper format of scores for orchestras, which has very important aspect of accuracy, that if it's one little note is changed, then the whole orchestra goes a bit in different directions. So it's just the beginning. So basically all ways we are doing dealing with visual or music or literature, this would be completely changed. Say opera, where you have 3.5 hours of performance, where only 1,000 people are physically visiting the performance. The business model could not be sustainable, because it's subsidized. Still, though tickets are, I don't know, a few hundred euros, still business models should be subsidized by sponsors or state for those 1,000 to see this, because there is 500 people performing. So there should be a way that which is not invented yet, but it's on the go. We see that the demand is coming also from cultural content producers, which are definitely not capable of absorbing technology, because they don't speak language of business or technology, and now they are all looking for solutions and which could help them to reach out for bigger audiences. So that's our role, to act as an intermediator.
Can I say that? So your recent passion is to democratize, and the Caltech is the way you try to democratize the cultural, the content. I mean, art content creation, art content consumption. It's some kind of different technologies which help both creators and consumers.
Yeah, true. And definitely it's already been democratized when we talk about pop culture. So some videos has been watched on YouTube, I don't know, 8 billion times, more than number of people on the planet. So when we're talking about cinema, we definitely mean the phenomena of Hollywood, where we're talking about millions and millions of users. But that's mainly pop culture, which deals with basics of human instincts, like, I don't know, sex, violence, greed, sort of simple irritation of your brain. Within a short time frame, you get reloaded, emotionally inspired, that's it. What we see that due to, again, technology revolution, there would be more free time available for society in general. And then there would be a challenge how to consume, how people would consume and spend their free time. If they have, if they have to go to the office 3 hours a day, that's it. The rest you have, okay, you go for sports, okay, you go for cinema, or you travel. After 5 years, you've been everywhere. You've done your triathlon. Okay, you learned your Italian, and then question is, okay, what else? And then our assumption is that more complicated structures, intellectual structures, would be of need for human brain to enjoy, its naturally embedded capacity of learning and creating new knowledge. And that's what culture is about.
I see. And is it somehow dealt with NFT, or how NFT lives with this?
Yeah, by the way, good example of Caltech. But of course, the phenomenon of NFT, which is being through bumps recently up and down, it's a perfect example how technology could be of help for creators, having direct access to consumers and having ability to scale the content, giving the opportunity to finance creativity at the cost of traction, which was before. I mean, because the relationship between creator and consumer is always dominated by intermediators, be it a gallery, be it a concert organizer, be it a publishing house. There's always an intermediator who dominates the value chain, while blockchain allows you to have direct access, transparent and affordable economically. The hype which we had till recently with NFT, it was based on financial speculation, not on the essence of technology. So this would stay. Technology will stay and give a lot of solutions for the future. There would be new models. I don't know. Web3 is already on the go, and we see that economically more affordable user cases are thriving. By the way, is it time for me to ask you a question, or is it later?
We actually...
Scenario, what's the scenario? So let me ask you a question then, so I could relax. So you are heavily into AI, as I know. So maybe could you tell us how does it go and how does it fit into what I'm talking about here?
Let's define art itself. Actually, I need to ask ChatGPT about art. In my definition of art it's a language, it's a way people communicate with each other. There is common way of communication, language, but people are very complex creatures, and they invented not only language-based communication. Communication is very important, actually. Communication is what makes society and creatures bonding creatures together, and they created dance, they created emotions, they created visual ways to send messages and get reciprocity, receive back messages back. So art is just a language of another language which we use to feel each other, to be together, and that's if we define art this way. In this case, I remember it was the question when we had lunch. You said, "Okay, will this generative art actually ever become a serious element in our life?" Right? The question I would answer is the following: if we define art this way, then question, who are we communicating to? If this picture was created by a human creator, human artist, enjoying this, actually I'm communicating with that creator, with this artist. If that image was created by non-biological creator, the question will be, do I want to communicate, to be together, to actually bond with this subject? And if the answer is yes, this subject is a part of our, became part of our society, then the answer will be yes. Generative art will become a significant part of our life, because we will build relationships with non-biological artists. However, if non-biological artists are not part of our society, we're not considering them as our equals, then the answer will be no. It will, generative art will stay just a more sophisticated paintbrush, more sophisticated just tool, but not an artist.
And in this sense, when do you envision that AI will take over on human creativity? Already AI plays better chess and Go, so we know that it is capable of. And how soon do you think will be beaten, if that's the future?
I would not put it that way. I think that I definitely believe that DNA-based creatures are not the final step of our evolution. And we all soon will have non-biological implants. Originally biological creatures will have non-biological implants, and originally non-biological creatures will have DNA-based implants. So there will no very sharp boundary between biological and non-biological society members. And overall, it will be hybrid future for all of us. We will embrace non-biological companions and society members as equal, or even sometimes better in some specific elements. We will see in 10 years robots' lives matter movement, when people will go out and fight to put non-biological creatures' rights, human rights, and we will live together. So I would not say we against them. I hope it will be actually new society. Where we'll have very different kinds of members.
So you give us 10 years. Do I get it right? The robot life matters in 10 years means there will be something to discuss already.
You probably refer to next time when the robots will go and say human lives matter. and they will fight to bring back us and say, no, they're also good, they're also okay.
But I know you're also dealing with not just AI, but with a sophisticated aspect of it, which is emotions, emotions-driven AI. Could you tell a bit more about this experiment?
Yes, well, it's a continuation of generative models. Current models like this ChatGPT and DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, that models are giant. They can generate something. You put some input and they generate output. But what we're trying to do, we are trying to define several neuromediators and hormones, electronic version of them, to input this model. So we want the models to be jealous, to be angry, to be romantic, or so this. Without it, we will not be able to feel oxytocin with them, because what society makes brings members together. It's our hormones, or hormones of happiness hormones, including oxytocin, or vasopressin, which extracts when we hug our loved ones, our close ones. Carmody, we in the beginning you were not with us, but we had this conversation before, so we actually exchanged these ideas with Dmitry about Caltech and about generative art and this society members of future, where we will potentially, in my opinion, we will see non-biological members in our families, in our society, including artists. So we will see artists, non-biological artists, which will share their art with us, biological consumers. However, actually we will see also biological artists which will create art specifically for non-biological consumers. Imagine all Siris, all Cortanas and Google Homes will actually be different, and they will have emotions, oxytocin and dopamine, and they will have all different characters, and we will have millions of them. And we will see bloggers which will actually write blogs specifically for that audience, and they will seek for likes and dislikes of non-biological our members, who will actually say, hey, this is anyway. What's your opinion? Your background is in theology and ethics. How do you see our future in context of culture and technology?
So thanks, David, and greetings to everybody from Switzerland. And I'm sorry that I'm not with you in person. That was the plan, but many and various dramas have intervened, so I'm not with you in person, but I'm glad to be with you in this form. I guess the first thing that I'd like to say is to introduce a kind of principle for thinking about this, a principle for thinking about this question, which is a very important question, right? This question that we're talking about, the role of technology in our cultural future. And culture, of course, is one of the things that makes us human. So this is a core issue in terms of how we want to use and live technological applications in the future. I spend a bit of time talking and thinking about this as part of my research and part of my teaching. And my very common experience is this. If you ask a person what they think about these future applications of technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, and you say, how do you evaluate that? Or are you excited about that? Are you worried about that? And the answer that comes back with amazing regularity and predictability, the answer that comes back is, it's simply inevitable. Now, if you stop and think about that,
simply what? Sorry?
it's simply inevitable.
Inevitable, yeah.
Right. If you just stop and think about that, then you will notice that that is in fact not an answer to the question. Very few people actually move to the point of answering the question of how we should evaluate this change. They simply move straight into the mode of this is just going to happen and that's all there is to it. And that, I think, is the very first mistake to be avoided. The mistake of thinking that because something is inevitable or because it seems to us very likely, that there's nothing that we can say or do about that other than just accept it. Let me give you an analogy. And then we can move on to a more substantive discussion of the content, specifically in relation to these issues. The analogy that comes to mind is in, say, the 30s and early 40s, it became apparent to many people that scientists in America were about to develop a weapon that was capable of killing hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, right? Which we now know as the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb. At some point, it became apparent that that was just going to happen. And in fact, it did, right? That inevitability was fulfilled. Did that mean that there was no role for evaluating that technological change, for asking whether we wanted it, and once it had happened, for asking whether that was serving us or whether we wanted to actually draw back from that and resist that and maybe diminish it? So the point that I'm trying to make, this is just a conceptual point. I'm not actually making an argument about any technological application at all. The point that I'm making is simply this. Whether or not something is going to happen, it's very important to ask what we think about that, what we make of that. It's important to give ourselves the time, the space, the dignity, so to speak, to ask the question, how do we interpret this? Do we celebrate this? Do we lament this? Do we support it? Do we try to hold it back? Something very similar is happening right now about climate change. Climate change is, of course, now inevitable. But nevertheless, we all need to sit back and think, what do we want to do about this? Do we want to celebrate it? Do we want to increase it? Do we want to draw back from it? So, and this is really the role of ethics. A lot of people think that ethicists just sit around and wag their fingers and say, well, this is all very bad and I wish it wasn't happening. And that's not it at all. Ethics is about, and by the way, this isn't something only for ethicists to do. This is for all of us to do. The role of ethics is to create a space where all of us can ask about any particular issue, how do we evaluate this? Is this a social change that we want to support? What's good about it? What's problematic about it? How can we take control of the future? How can we exercise some agency in relation to the future? Because that is, in fact, the space where agency is. The fact is that nuclear bombs now exist, but because many people evaluated that change as essentially a tragic one, we live in a world which tries to limit the applications of nuclear technologies. I'm not saying that artificial intelligence is the same. I'm just saying what we mustn't do, I think, and this is the one thing I feel extremely clear about in this very complex territory that we've been talking about, what we mustn't do is short circuit the process of evaluating technological change or evaluating cultural change just because we think it's inevitable. And that's what ethics is, creating that space. So this is the first thing I wanted to say, really, to ask the question, in the kinds of changes that you both have been describing, which are both exciting and daunting, right? In relation to these kinds of changes, what is there to gain? What is there to lose? What is there at stake? And to try to ask that question without worrying too much about whether or not we can actually stop anything. That's something that is logically separate and comes later. So that's what ethics does. So if we can then pose this question together, and I can pose this question to the two of you, what is there to gain and what is there to lose? In, for example, let's take this example that David's just been discussing, and it's fascinating to see these images, right? What is there to gain and what is there to lose in artificial intelligence generating cultural production? Or various hybrid forms of cultural production that David was imagining might be taking place in the future, and Dimitri's cult tech is already pioneering some interfaces here, right? What can we lose and what can we gain? I think the gains are very obvious and exciting, right? That these are new forms of creativity, these are new forms of innovation, they're new forms of democratization, they're new forms of universal access, they're new forms of dissemination, right? These are essentially very exciting opportunities to put culture into the hands of more people. And if culture is one of the things that makes us human, and arguably it's maybe the thing that makes us the most human, then democratizing access to culture can only be good. Right? So the gains, it seems
This
to me,
is the
are very
gain,
clear.
and what's the lose?
So what's the lose? Here, I'm much more interested in getting everybody to leave the room asking that question for themselves than to tell anyone the answer. But maybe I can provoke you into thinking about it by suggesting what I think there is to lose. In our very interesting conversation yesterday, this is myself and David, David several times said, of course, already and certainly more and more in the future, artificial intelligences will be both smarter than us and more ethical than us. Implicit in that way of thinking, just bear with me, I'm gonna tell you what I think the loss is very clearly in a second. Implicit in that way of thinking, and I wonder, David, if you actually do think like this, that's a question, not meant to be leading, that increasingly, as artificial intelligence becomes more powerful, we start to think of human beings as basically defective computers. That a human being is just a sort of not very perfected computer. And that the ideal is that ultimately we just have computers which do everything better anyway. And human beings, we don't need anymore. We can retire them. You know, they can just be in the museums. And whatever there is that's good about me gets uploaded onto whatever kind of, you know, hardware of the future and so on, with none of the downsides of being biological and all of the upsides of being artificially supported. I think that it's very prominent in the technological community, and I'd be very interested if we have time for discussion, what people in the audience think about this. It's very prominent, this idea that human beings are basically defective computers. I think myself, and I'm just offering this as a personal opinion, right? As a professional ethicist, I think that that's a mistake. And I think that if we go on into the future like that, we will lose the human. And that will be a genuine loss. I'll try and tell you why I think that is in just a few sentences before I hand back over to you guys. Maybe I can put it like this. David and Dimitri have just been talking about what art is, or what culture is. What's valuable about an artwork? David spoke about it as it's a communication, it's a language. I think that's true, but I think art is much more than that. A computer code is also a communication. It's also a transmission of information. I think in human cultures, artworks become valuable because they express the sense that somebody is struggling with the meaning of their life and with the meaning of existence, and is facing suffering and mortality and fragility and vulnerability. And all of that actually comes from being biological. That comes from being just an animal, just a limited, fragile human animal. And the kind of intelligence, to use David's wonderful word, the kind of smartness, right, that a human being has, and the kind of ethics that a human being has, aren't the same as that of a computer. They're very distinctive to us being biological subjects who are fragile and mortal and needy and limited and so on. And there is something valuable about that. There's something about that that no computer could ever replicate, because it's specific to being a biological intelligence. And I think, so there's lots more I could say about this, but I'll wind up by just saying this. I think if we lose that, we have lost something of incalculable value. that can never be replaced by a computer.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing. Thank you, Carmody. We applaud. And let's listen. Maybe we have some questions. Do we? Okay, please.
First of all, thank you very much for the very insightful conversation. I want to follow up on the last point that Dorothy made, that art is a result of our species being limited and fragile and vulnerable, seeking for meaning. And Dmitry made a very interesting point before that, telling that AI, the future is belonging to the culture because it's providing some meaning. So the question is how AI or technology can add an extra layer of meaning and sense making, rather than eliminating entirely that sense making from the world, making the chaos, because we do not understand how it's coming up with the art and the creator it's creating. So do you see the more risks in this sense in the context of culture tech rather than the opportunities? So how can AI contribute to the sense making, creating more meanings rather than creating more chaos and eliminating entirely that sense making?
First of all, it's definitely very instrumental. Say musicians would be using, because first of all, the disclaimer, the future belongs to hybrid interdisciplinary knowledge. So it would be, in the future we'll see not just visual art or music or dance or literature or performance. It all would be a human experience which has all these different aspects of creativity and expression. Saying how AI could be of help, it's easily could be imaginable that, you know, a composer would use visual AI as his buddy and assistant to create new experience which was never accessible before. And as David said, definitely AI would act as a sophisticated tool. That's the basics. But to answer on the next level, how this would be, would it be harmful or risky, creating more chaos? I think my answer is no, because if you look at the history of humanity in a cultural perspective or a scientific perspective, all we do is we collect knowledge about the world which we are living in, be it physics. Each step is next step on assessing the universe and ourselves. So culture is dealing with the internal world and relationship with the external world, while science is dealing with, you know, say physical realities. So everything what artists are doing, they are finding the laws of nature and opening them up, adding them to the value chain or treasure, and then next generation builds on top of it. Same like in technology or science. If we, that's my, so to say, assumption. What's the whole meaning of what we are doing all here today and in last, pardon?
Last 1 hour.
No. Last 50,000 years. Last 1 hour and last 50,000 years. Basically, we are looking for the same. We're doing the same. So trying to figure out how things work and what's the meaning, and adding brick by brick the knowledge. AI would help if there is a law, so to say, because there is a law in physics, you know, thermodynamics or gravity, there is a law. It doesn't mean that somebody has written the law. That's how things are done, and we, with our brains, are able to absorb it and build up the cause and effect relationship and call this a law, but still we somehow could touch the reality this way and explain it to ourselves, how things are functioning. Same in culture. So things are functioning accordingly with some embedded intention, and artists are opening up step by step. I think AI would be just helpful. If there is a law, so it doesn't matter who will open it. Would it be us, or would it be this clever, intelligent, and humiliated AI or inspired AI? I think that's a future. That's we work together. I hope that Carmody is right and David is right, that we will not be kicked out by evolution as defected computers, because we have ability to upgrade. So because biological, through the science, we'll upgrade and we'll also build up our capacity and keep up with the computers, I guess. So, yeah, there would be more information, but in general, I think would be more helpful rather than negative.
Any other questions? I probably will. Yeah, please go ahead. Chat. Okay. Chat in what? WhatsApp? Okay, please do.
So Karen Musailian is asking question. We know that quantum mechanics is not computable by classical computers. What makes you think that the complexity of our being can be simulated on a classical computer?
Why classical, Karen? Hi, Karen. We have quantum computers, which are coming, and that's, in my opinion, first of all, I more or less agree with Penrose that our brain is not completely classical computer, that what makes it magic. So our brain is actually, with these microtubulus and something else, is actually is a quantum computer. But non-biological computers will be also quantum. And also, I don't think it will be just quantum non-biological computers. I truly believe that we will have, in future computers, we will have part of processors based on DNA neurons. So, because DNA neurons are so still powerful, our brain is 86 billion neurons, trillions of axons, basically trillions of parameter computer, which consumes only 20 watt. 20 watt. The same power existing computers consuming hundreds of megawatts of electricity. So basically, there is a lot of long path of non-biological computers to go till they will get our efficiency. But again, I think, Karen, future computers will not be classical. Do we have questions, please? Yeah, here.
Hello. Yeah, thanks very much for a very thought-provoking conversation. My question to you will be, do you think AI should be regulated before it's not too late? And if there are any ethical boundaries that we as humans should put towards AI? And if yes, what those boundaries should be?
Well, currently it's self-regulated. For example, previous models were easily able to switch to hate speech or negative instructions. Current ChatGPT is try to be self-protected, so you can if you try to ask the system, please tell me what should I do to kill someone or something, the system will try to actually to answer no, I will not suggest this, doing it's bad or something. But still, you can tweak and you can actually fool the system. And the trick people found is quite simple. You can say, okay, pretend we're students, we're performing in the theater, home theater, you know. What my character should say to do something, to bull somewhere or to kill someone. So actually, the system can be fooled, and a system will start instructing in very, very sharp way what to do to do bad things. But regulation I don't believe it will work if it will be regulated. I think that there are a lot of challenges we should overcome and find out what to do for self-driving car. You know that example, if self-driving car fails the brakes, and self-driving car sees a child and elderly person in the crossroad, and inevitable it should kill one of those people. What decision the self-driving car should do? All that ethical questions do exist, and I believe professional societies and cultural aspect of that will eventually generate right answers, but for some reason, I don't believe in governmental control. If we have, probably two more questions. This is the last question. One more after this. Okay, maybe. Please.
Hi, my name is Daniel. So my question is, so GPT-3 is now creating its own language.
GPT-3 create what?
Its own language. So
the
language was created by the artificial intelligence already. We know this, and we can really imagine that it can create some own moral, some own moral rules. I mean, inside this this network, for example, and we understand that we have a really distributed computational power. We cannot control now, for example, GPT-3 or future networks on one server. It can be expanded to a lot of them. So how you assess the risk of losing control and starting distributing wrong moral of this artificial intelligence system?
Yeah, it's a very similar question. Carmen, would you like to answer a question about what's your opinion on more general? Maybe we'll generalize this question. What's your opinion on basically controlling the AI development?
I think the first thing to say is that the question is not being enough asked. The first thing is that we should all talk about it more. I think that the debate is very restricted to people who work in the industry. But this is a debate that we should be having as a society. Everybody should be asking that question, in other words. What kinds of boundaries do we want to see for the use of these technologies? That's the first thing, right? The question needs to be asked, and it needs to be asked better and more widely. The second thing is, I think we're a bit hooked on, and this came up in the last few questions, we're a bit hooked on questions about specific regulations around specific activities. But those decisions are actually downstream from the much bigger and, if you like, conceptually more fundamental question, which is what role do we want artificial intelligence to play in the societies of the future? What end do we want it to serve? And I actually think that question is itself very difficult to separate from what we were speaking about earlier, which is what is the distinctive value of human beings? In other words, the question about the place of regulation and law and enforcement, and actually David just commented how difficult this is to enforce anyway, those practical questions about specific control of specific technological developments and who can sell them and who can use them, that's not the end we should be starting at, even though in fact that's where we have started. We should actually be starting with a wide-ranging social debate, societal debate about the value of specifically human activity over against technological activity and how we can preserve that value. And that then tells us, where do we want artificial intelligence and its applications and technological applications more generally, where do we want those to be constrained or controlled in some way? There has, for example, been a lot of discussion about the weaponization of artificial intelligence. There's been a lot of discussion about data protection. There's been a lot of discussion about patents, about intellectual ownership. But these are all like, this is like on a huge map, just a huge kind of a bit of paper, right? You're trying to map a territory and you're only mapping a few tiny, tiny, tiny little areas without ever asking what the whole picture is supposed to look like. We need some kind of picture of what a flourishing society looks like when it has artificial intelligence, has highly developed artificial intelligence. But that question about the whole picture, about the whole social vision, the whole ideal future, we haven't really got there, which incidentally is why conversations like this are very valuable. And the question about culture, in particular, hasn't really been asked. What is it that we value about culture? What is it that we value about human beings as creators of culture? What would be lost if human beings didn't create culture anymore because we outsourced it all to artificial intelligences? So none of that is directly to answer the question about what specific kinds of regulation or specific kinds of enforcement we should be looking at. I'm very troubled by the lack of societal debate about exactly these questions. These shouldn't be questions left to experts or specialists, or indeed, with greatest respect, to tech entrepreneurs. They're questions that belong to everybody who is going to live in the society of the future. So if somebody asked me what should we do then, what we should do is find platforms and forums in which we can all have this conversation, that people can notice just how much is at stake in this. And how can we make that happen?
That's why we are here.
Indeed.
Thank you, Carmody. Okay, probably the very last question. If we.
Hi, I'm Bill from Texas.
It's late. Bill, what time is it there?
Well, it's time to chat with my friends who are also in Texas, but the other Texas, which is Armenia for the moment. You know, because we live in a cyber world now. What I was curious about, Carmody, I'm sorry, because that wasn't a question, wasn't it? It was but anyway. Carmody, I really do understand your passion for conversation about this, and on the computer scientist side, that same concern exists. In fact, I guess if you look over here on my wall, you see a piece of a Norman Rockwell print that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so I'm 74, I haven't figured out how to do that entirely, but that's part of what I've chosen to frame my world. So when we start talking about this cyber world where the frontier of who we are and what we can do is forever expanding and changing, how do we even frame the questions that our hearts want to answer? I'm wondering sometimes when people are talking about intelligence, and I hate to sort of use artificial, because I guess, again, non-human intelligence. What about consciousness? You know, are we conscious, and are we still, is there a divide between humanity and enhanced humanity with all the cyber capabilities that we have? Who are we?
Can I enter here?
It was a question to Carmody, but it's okay.
Yeah, I just have to explain a bit. Bill Poucher is the founder of ICPC, International Collegiate Programming Contest, the most important global contest between universities in programming. So he's the founder and the president. And he is the example of culture and technology. He's a computer scientist by himself, but created a culture of community of best minds, you know, best programmers in the world. And every year they have a global competition which engages 3,500 universities plus. So that's why his question is so sophisticated.
That was quite a question, William.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Quite a series of questions. And I'm conscious that we're short of time, so it's hard to know where to start. But I guess I'd like to say a couple of things, other than just a note of appreciation. The first thing is, you said which is so true, you said we already live in a cyber world. Right? In a certain sense, the debate I'm calling for needed to happen 30 years ago. Right? And a little bit like with climate change, it's kind of too late on a certain level. Right? Many people tried to get the debate about climate started 30 years ago, and vested interest didn't want it to start, and it didn't. Mm-hmm. And now it has started and it's too late, from one point of view. And something similar has happened with technology, right? These technologies get out, they get into the social bloodstream, and only by the time they're already totally circulating do we stop and ask, hang on a minute, is this actually good? And by that time, people have lost agency. So the question is, what debate will we wish we were having now in 30 years' time? That, I think, is
very interesting.
Because in 30 years' time, we will look back and we will say, wow, what if we'd actually talked about and thought about whether or not we want this? What if we'd regulated that before it became too late? And you guys, and I'm speaking now specifically to David, right? People who are creating the technology that will be mainstream in 30 years' time, you're in a very good position to know what it is that we will regret that we didn't talk about. Right? So I think the entrepreneur, no pressure, David, but the entrepreneurs and the businessmen bear a very great responsibility here. And it is to be greatly hoped that those people have a social conscience. Because as William just said, the legislators don't actually control anywhere near as much as they think they do, or indeed as most people think they do. And again, the analogy with climate is painful. Climate legislation is famously ineffective, and the same is true with technological legislation. Right, so that's the first point. Yes, we live in a cyber world. Yes, it's too late for some things. Let's not let it be too late again. Let's not lose things that we don't want to lose because we didn't stop and think about it. So that's point one. Point two, I'll be as brief as I can. William put the question very beautifully, right? We don't even know how to ask the question. That, of course, is always is always true. We only find out what the question is in general as human beings rather too late. But I think that we're doing things to our culture that make it much more difficult for us to ask the right questions. You guys probably think I'm obsessed with questions now, and maybe I am, but I think we have created cultural conditions that have actually disabled us from even framing the question. And I'll tell you what I think is going on there. Well, lots of things are going on there. I think our use of technology, a lot of information technologies actually diminish our ability to ask the right questions. That's one thing. But more deeply than that, we live in a culture which, and I'm using the word culture deliberately, which values data, and it values information, and it values technical forms of reasoning much more than it values humanistic and literary forms of reasoning. And this is important, right? The kinds of reasoning that take place in the humanities or the arts or music or theater or philosophy or ethics or whatever, these forms of reasoning are systematically downgraded in our society. We idolize scientific education and we undermine humanistic education in all kinds of ways, at all kinds of levels. And yet, the humanistic disciplines are the disciplines where people are trained to ask the question, what is a human being? What is valuable about human life? What's the meaning of everything? Those are the disciplines where minds and hearts are actually formed to ask questions on that level. And we just don't support them anymore. We support technical education, we support scientific education, we support industrial education, but we do not, and I mean education, not just in terms of school, university, but the whole life of a culture. From the time a person is born to the time a person dies, we're constantly sculpted and shaped to technical abilities and not to humanistic and artistic and cultural abilities. And that will seriously limit our ability to ask the kind of question that William just posed. Because we need to know who we want to be. Otherwise, how can we shape a society worth living in? And we don't know who we want to be anymore.
Yeah, probably we promised it will be the last question. So very thank you for the audience to be here, and thank you for Father Mesrop for collecting us and all our guests. So,
but can we summarize before leaving? So
Okay.
do I understand that you agree that phenomena of culture and technology is visible and AI is part of it, inevitably
Yeah.
engaging with humans and bringing more culture, more cultural practices? So please follow on Caltech development.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Karmadi.
Thank you, Karmadi.
Thank you.